They're on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters. Imagine building your entire identity around helping others find meaning outside of the uniform, only to have your job disappear overnight. Not because you failed, but because the system shifted. That's where Marsha Cleff found herself. 7.5 years as a TAP counselor, guiding senior enlisted and officers through the fog of transition, and suddenly she's no longer at her desk. She could have faded out quietly, but instead she doubled down, taking the part she loved most, helping people own their story on paper, and built something of her own from scratch. Now Marsha's pouring that same mix of clarity, compassion, and blunt honesty into six-star resume strategy. This isn't about job titles or checking boxes. It's about showing veterans they get to redefine themselves again and again, and that it's not just allowed, it's necessary. If you've ever felt boxed in by your old rank, your MOS, or by what someone else thinks you should be now that you're out, this one's for you, because nobody gets out of this without facing down that who am I now moment, and you deserve every tool you can get. So let's get into it. Marsha, welcome to the show. Long time coming.
I know. Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm super excited to do this. A little nervous,
Yeah,
but super excited.
super excited as well. It's a unique opportunity to have a real life TAP counselor here. And I think a lot of people might think that this is going to go a different direction, but we're actually on the same page on a lot of things. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just build your background, kind of give us the story, your short version of your life story, and how did you end up a TAP counselor?
Okay, so went and got my master's in college student personnel from the University of Rhode Island. And while I was getting my master's, I met my husband while he was stationed at West Point. So then got married, or no, finished, got my master's, then, went, got my first job. And from there, I was working actually in a college. So from there, then we moved to, he went on recruiting detail. So we ended up in San Marcos, Texas. So I was working at Job Corps, working with at-risk youth. From there, we went to Fort Stewart, Georgia, where I got a job at Youth Challenge Academy, working again with the at-risk youth. From there, we went to Montana, and I was working as a case manager for adults with developmental disabilities. And then from there, came to Pennsylvania 10 years ago once he retired, and saw a job for transition assistance program. And that's where I ended up. And it's funny because people are probably going to be like, where is she from? Her accent is so weird. I am originally from Rhode Island, and my undergrad degree is in speech pathology. Can you imagine with my accent being moving to Texas trying to get a job as a speech pathologist? Not going to
Okay.
happen. So it's so funny how everything just kind of worked out that I decided I didn't want to get my master's in speech pathology. So when I went college student personnel.
So
So that's
you've
how I ended
always
up here.
it's so throughout your career, you've just always had this desire to help others be
Oh,
better.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and so let's talk about some of the things before you took the TAP job. Did you see a lot of the issues that were going on through transition, just over being married to a soldier, and kind of just seeing what all that was about, and maybe that influenced your decision to take the TAP job, or was it like the TAP job is what's available, I'm going to take it?
I think some of it had to do with just knowing, like, what when my husband retired in 2015, I didn't even know what the TAP program was. We were stationed in Butte, Montana. He went through an Air Force TAP program. I stayed home. He went on leave, or he went there, TDY. I just enjoyed the house to myself for that week. Had no clue what it was. And then got to got back to Pennsylvania and just sort of had a job, saw the writing on the wall, like I needed to get out of that place, and was just looking for jobs and more on that career development side. And it just happened to be TAP. They want people that have a military background or military adjacent background, which is where the military spouses come in. And I applied and got it. So that's really why. So I don't really think I really had that, like, oh, I want to help service members going, you know, into the job, but once I knew that the job existed. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know
Yeah.
the job. Once I knew that that job actually existed, that's the job I wanted, but I didn't go searching for a job helping veterans.
Yeah, and for sure, I retired in 2015 as well, so I know what the landscape of a
Okay.
transition assistance program was, and it was a mess. I
Yeah.
mean, you figure it just came about, I think, in 2011. They revamped it in 2014, but in 2015, we had so many injuries, so many wounded warriors getting out. A med board process would take up to 24 months, sometimes even longer, and my TAP was, except for the resume portion of that whole week, was all online. I don't remember any of it. That's my scope, and
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
it was ridiculous. Now I was a med board, and I was one of those that was held over for a long time in the med board
Okay.
process. They lost all my shit in digital land somewhere between computer systems, but also
What?
my pedalo worked out of a fucking trailer, right? So like these makeshift trailers that they set up and then called permanent. I was at Fort Lewis, called permanent buildings. That was like
Okay.
the whole tap village. I almost said trap village, which is definitely not a trap village. Uh, but it was just like just these random trailers, and there'd be like 3 or 4 offices in them, and that's where your Peblos would be, or the VA claims guy would be. Sometimes you'd have to go over to Waller Hall and figure out shit over there. It was just a mess. There was no guidance, no structure whatsoever. So you mentioned that they were looking for people with military background or military adjacent background. Now, you being a spouse, I think you're way closer than some people. But one of the biggest complaints I hear about the TAP program, and it's constant, and I know you are in a unique spot because Carlisle is, I don't know, more bougie, if you will. Just it caters to a different,
It
a
does.
different demographic, right? Like senior enlisted, West Pointers, senior officers. But a lot of people say their biggest complaint is like, how can somebody teach me TAP when they haven't actually lived through this themselves?
Right. And that is a big point to it. Um, and there's two sides of it. Like I do hear the how can I teach, how can someone teach me tap that doesn't have, never went through it. And I know for myself when I was teaching, I would always, let them know like I'm a military spouse. Like I've never worn the uniform. Um, but again, I understand my husband went through it, so I kind of bring it from like a family member's point of view. Um, I do personally think that veterans, well, going back, there's two sections that the counselors teach. They teach the managing your transition, which is my transition, then the MOC crosswalk. I do think that my coworkers that I've gone through that have been veterans, they do a much better job doing the my transition because they've worn the boots, like they get it. Um, but when it comes to the MOC crosswalk, like the how do you redefine yourself? How do you quote unquote sell yourself? I think as a military spouse who has, you know, gone from job to job to job every 2 to 3 years, they're rewriting their resume, they're the job title they had in one place is not the job title they had in the next place. I think that's where military spouses are really valuable, where a person who has just retired and immediately takes a position with TAP, they don't necessarily have that background. So, I think a perfect TAP team should be, one veteran and one military spouse because, or a veteran who's currently a military spouse. And, so I do think that it has to be a good balance.
Well, I agree with that because, like you said, the person that's worn the boots knows the mindset, knows. I think that's why I've been so successful in just sharing my perspective on all of this because I was lost for a long time, and I just explained to you that I didn't really have a transition program.
Right.
Plus, also the med board, that's a completely different monster than actually just ETSing or retiring completely.
Oh,
It was a
absolutely.
surprise to me. One day I'm seeing the surgeon's telling me, no, you can't do this anymore. We're starting your med board. And then 18 months later, I'm out of the Army. You know what I mean? So for me, it's definitely different, but that mindset is huge. Like having walked a mile in those shoes from spending my entire adult life from 17 to 30 years old to then just thrust into the civilian world. it's tough. Like,
It's
and you
scary.
need you need that perspective. And I agree too that you need a military spouse or just somebody who's successful in civilian life, who knows what it is, speaks the civilian language, can translate. You know, I know when you filled out my form, you mentioned like, yes, as an infantryman, you're not just, locked into private security, right? Like you can rewrite your resume, showcase your skills and land a good corporate job or whatever. So I think what you're saying is important. And I think we need, look, we all know that the whole transition process needs to be overhauled. I have some ideas. I'm just waiting for the right doors to open so that they'll hear my fucking ideas. You know what I mean?
Yep, I understand.
So my next question would be, what what are some of the biggest challenges when you first got to TAP, and then over your 7.5 years that you saw that we are dealing with as we're getting out? I hear this was the same way for me. A lot of people chalk TAP up to, here's information overload, here's a ton of resources, we're not going to give you time to digest these resources or teach you how to implement these resources, just know that these are resources, good luck. They also, on the enlisted side, very heavily, for somebody like me who had a career where I was deployed all the time as an infantry guy, I signed up for college twice and had to drop both times. So I
Aw.
didn't have an opportunity to finish a degree. I was in the places that didn't have internet access. Our MWR to call home barely even worked. And if it did work, it was always shut down because we were losing people or somebody was getting injured, the notification process, all of that. So, that led to this advice like, hey, congratulations, you're a veteran, you'll have no trouble getting a job, which is simply a fucking lie. It's not true.
It's
It's
not.
not true. I know it's not true because I could probably name 3 veterans right now who collectively have applied to over 1,200 jobs since they've been out and are not getting anything. Um, they also tell you, use your GI Bill, get the degree, you'll land a 6-figure job, slap you on the ass, congratulations, you're successful. I disagree with that whole thought process completely. And I'm curious, like, what did you see when you first got in and how did it evolve over your time there?
I think in some ways it did get better. When I first started, it was the one size fits all. And then they did go into the tiers, like tier one, tier two, tier three. Um, I think where some of the issues become is that as a tier one, those, you don't have to do the Department of Labor class. You're exempt from the 1 day, and if most people, if you're not going to do the 1 day, you're not going to do the employment workshop. And some of it is on the soldier being like, oh, well, I don't have to take this class, I don't want to take this class. And if they're not required, then then people take the easy way out. Um, and but then it's also, I do also think that it's on the counselor, that the counselor needs to talk to the person, be like, yes, you are exempt from this particular class, but just, when you go to apply for a job, you can't say, instead of turning in a resume, you turn in your 2648 and say, well, it says I'm a tier one, I don't need a resume. So I think, like, you have to use, that's where that counseling comes in, to get them, to get everyone on the same page.
Well,
Um,
and I'll be the first to say, like, what you're saying is valid. A lot of the onus has to go back to the service member. I agree with that, and
it
and
needs to be a
there's
conversation.
there's a couple of things that I mean, look, when I was med boarding out, it's freedom, right? Like, you're like, I'm not going to be bound to, like, you have a whole different mindset.
Hmm.
You're like, man, I don't want to do any more of this dumb army shit. I can't wait to be a civilian. And it's largely because nobody has prefaced like what you're about to experience when you no longer have the military. So look, I can admit that, yeah, 50% of it was my fault, for not taking advantage of whatever I was supposed to take advantage of, even if like that was an opportunity for me, because like I genuinely don't remember. It's been over a decade ago, and I just know that it was a messy process. But
Right.
there is a lot of validity to what you're saying, and for those that are listening, I want to encourage you, like, listen to what Marsha's saying. Take advantage of everything, even if you are, and I don't know how the tiers are broken down and how they put you into tier one, two, or three, and what all comes with that, but even if you're not required to do it, maybe go do it anyway, because then you don't have any excuses. If you opted out of that and you don't have a resume and you're not having success getting a job, well, you have to look in the mirror and own that for yourself as well, because you opted out of that.
Absolutely. And again, like it's got to be that conversation between having that counselor that you have a relationship with. And again, I'm coming from this very uniquely because we were such a small center that I got to know people. We did classes once a month. My office was attached to the classroom, so even the people that were coming in um, you know, from Erie, Pennsylvania, even those that came in from the cadet command. I mean, we had people from Fort Knox coming. The cadet command was sending people to Carlisle Barracks because of the service that we were able to provide them. Um, so even if we only talked over the phone or through Teams for a full week, they had access to us. So I do come with that very skewed, like, get to
Yeah,
know
for
your
sure.
TAP counselor. Like if you're still in the program and in the process, get to know that TAP counselor. They are there for you. Like
Well, and I had heard that, we got connected through a couple of people who were actively in your tap
yep.
your program
The day we got the
when
news.
yeah, when the announcement came down. I forget who reached out to me, but DM'd me, and then we had like a 45-minute phone call. He told me I can't remember if he had said that he knew you personally or was close to you, had a relationship of some kind, and was like,
Yeah, he
I'll
was in
find
Iraq.
out
Yep.
the information I can, and I'll connect you with the people that I can connect you with. And then we did connect and we talked, and you agreed to come on and talk about this on the show. And so I, there's so much to unpack with transition here. I'm just curious. Did you ever get a word on why? Why did they close your center, particularly the one that had the best reputation of all TAP programs in the country? And this isn't just coming from the one guy who connected us. I had several other people reach out to me and say, "Did you hear this news? I can't believe they're shutting down Carlisle Barracks TAP program." I know that kind of you know affects really guard and reserve guys more than it did active duty guys, if I'm not mistaken. And if I'm misspeaking, let me know. But I still think it's pretty shitty.
Yes, it's very shitty. And it's not shitty because I'm no longer there. Like I'm now pursuing, being an entrepreneur and doing like, resume writing.
Well, it's
Um,
shitty
but
because
it's shitty
it's
to
a
the service
resource we're
members.
entitled to,
Yes.
and they just out of nowhere decide, oh well, we're just going to close this down for what reason?
Right. We were never told. We were never given an official answer. We were just saying reallocate. We were just told a reallocation of funds. That's all we were ever told.
And
So
the way I also understand it is they didn't have a backup plan for what to do with those people that would typically be assigned to Carlisle to get out, right?
um, everything went over to the virtual center.
Because
Um,
that's what we need.
Um, I will say Carlisle Barracks is still open for the VA benefits and services and the Department of Labor. The only classes that Carlisle Barracks is not doing are the transition day ones. But other than that, and there's no counselors, but classes are still happening there. I do believe so that one I know for sure. Like that, I was actually went and had lunch with the Department of Labor instructor yesterday in my old office. So I know that, and the students, like, so I know that one. I heard that Dietrich is still having physical classes, just not the transition day. For that, everyone does need to go through the virtual center for their pre-separation briefing, their initial counseling, and those classes. Um, and yes, the service is still there. I'm not going to knock the virtual center. I was attached to them for a year and a half during COVID. When we all shut down, I worked out of my spare bedroom, and I didn't have time to know there was a pandemic going around because I was on the phone, 40
Yeah.
hours, 40 hours a week. Um, but so, whatever services they're getting, I'm not going to knock them at all. I will say though that you know, the relationship that I talked about while, having that good relationship, I was also attached to the virtual center, but I was also doing Carlisle Barracks stuff as well. And my clients that went, to 2020, 2021, I don't know them that
Yeah.
well. Like we never had that one-on-one connection, or that, calling up and being like, "Hey, here's my timeline.
Yeah.
What can I do with that? Am I on track? What do I need to do now?" I didn't get those calls because they didn't feel connected with me.
Well, and there's also an element too of you're already in a week long program that by and large it's a check the block thing in order for us to get out. So none of us truly want to be there. Let's be honest. And so now you already have the issue of people not having to go through a certain thing based on their tier. Well, what do you think that does when you shift to virtual and they're at home with all the distractions? And I know that as somebody who works at a computer 14 hours a day, right? Like
Right.
there are plenty of distractions, even though I'm here by myself, for me to not get things done. Imagine putting that with a program that you really don't want to be in
Right.
either,
Well, and I do think that part of it is the mindset of the person who doesn't want to be there needs to change.
Of course.
Um, so if you go into the mindset of, I need this, this information is going to help me. And even if this information is just from a fire hose, at least I have the resources and I can click on the link to, get me to the VA.
Right.
Um, so some of it is definitely like, that mind shift. But even when I was teaching from home, for the virtual center, I would be teaching, and there was one day there was a construction happening at the end of my street, and in the middle of me talking, I was just like, blah blah blah. Why is there a backhoe going up my street? Like I got distracted, even
Yeah.
though I was teaching it. So there is a lot of distraction. And if you are doing it from home, you do need to just have that mindset that this is, I'm just going to, you know, close the door. No one needs to know, where I am. I and I think if you do it at home and you're disciplined enough, you can get something out of it. I'm very nervous about the people that they don't want to do it, so they literally just have it playing in the background while they're still doing their job. Or the
This guy.
command,
This guy right here.
or what about the command? When commands don't support and don't see the value of tap, then they're just like, "Oh, I know you're busy, but let me just you need to email. You need to,
Yeah. Yeah.
respond to my email."
That's the
Um,
direction we're headed next. Is there's a lot of things that I see. I have my philosophy on how tap can be run better, more efficiently, and truly, I think help. And we'll get into that. But I think one of the big issues that I hear a lot is, and this was true for me, even in a med board, even though so it's a little skewed, but the reg says 365 days to transition. Like, and so now we're cramming all of this into a week. Do you think a week is enough?
no, I definitely don't think a week is enough. And the proper way of doing tap is not to do it 40 hours in 1 week. It's actually supposed to be like, take a class, and then, next week take another class and kind of spread it out. If you are in one of the models like Carlisle Barracks, where it is just, like a week long, being able to go more than once. And I have had I've been teaching numerous times with, like, commanders and, or colonels, and they're sitting up, or like I'm looking at them and they're slowly going pale. And I'm just like, is everything okay? And they're just like, I didn't know what TAP had to offer. And I know I have screwed my service members, my soldiers over, because I didn't know they were getting all this valuable information. And I would say to them, you can't change the past, but make sure that go back and tell the majors and the captains, tell them how important this is. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's a big point of contention is command not giving enough time
yeah,
or not giving a shit, and like just using you. I mean, particularly, I would say my experience comes from the infantry side, right?
Yeah.
And I saw it a lot. But I would say probably most combat arms MOSs are going to be like this. They're going to use you and abuse you till they get every last dropout till the last minute, and then they'll worry about whether or not you transition. I've seen people not finish TAP and then get chastised by the command as they're trying to clear because they
Yep.
didn't finish TAP. And a big argument between a first sergeant and an E7. Well, motherfucker, you didn't give me the time that I needed to actually get there and do these things, right? Like, that's a big part of the problem. And it kind of leads into what you're talking about. It's designed, it should be designed to be spread out. And I think that really goes along with kind of some of my ideas for how to fix transition. So we'll get that out of the way. My idea for transition is we had warrior transition units. At the height of the surge, we stood up separate units where you come off of your active units books, you go to warrior transition unit. Your only mission there, and what they are structured to do, is get you to all of your medical appointments and prepare you to retire. Period. End of story. I don't know why at day 366, before you're supposed to ETS or retire, you're not transferred over to a transition assistance unit. And for that next year, you just, I don't know. My idea is, my big problem with TAP is it's a blanket fix for an individual problem. We're all in different spots and need different resources when we're getting out. What Adam Peters needed is not what Marsha Cleff needed, is not what Joe Snuffy needs, is not what Jane Doe needs. We all need different things. And so my idea is, I think it'd be a lot more cost effective too. It would definitely help the units out so that they don't have to, because in the Army, you're still on MTO until you retire or
Right.
ETS. They can't backfill that spot until you're off their books. So put them in a unit that's specifically designed for the next year to transition. Get them with a counselor, a coach, somebody who can just evaluate, like, okay, where are you in life right now? And then create a structured plan of resources that they individually need that are going to set them up for success. And I think part of it needs to be too, you need to be sitting with some kind of mental health counselor and like working through, like, who in the fuck am I? Like, what is my identity? Because that's a big part of the problem. I was the best infantryman I could be for 13 years in support of the global war on terror for the United States Army from 17 to 30 years old. I didn't have an identity outside of that. Never had a chance to develop one. So when I get out in November of 2015, it's like, what now? Like, I don't even know who I am. So that's kind of my idea, is put these guys in a unit and stop priming them and setting them up for failure by saying, you're a veteran, you'll get a 6-figure job, congratulations, that's success. It's like, well, that's not my definition of success.
Right. And even if you do get that that six figure, if you're miserable, then how is that success?
Exactly. Well,
You know,
and you had mentioned that on the forum too. And I'm a huge proponent of this, is do not just take the first job that comes your way because of the
right.
salary. Like, what I think, even you even took it a step further. Like, as long as you can pay your bills and you're happy, then be patient.
Absolutely. And people are going to take that first job because all we see and we all need is that money. So like we are going to get nervous and take that first job. And sometimes they the saying is always, it's easier to get a job when you have a job, and people will be like, well, I don't get that. And it's like, well, you're not as stressed out, so like you can relax a little bit, you can kind of just go, if I get this job, great. If I don't, there's going to be another one coming. But it's very tough to do that when your income is being slashed by 100%, 30%, 50%. That's very difficult to have that, like, no stress. So, having that, like, a dream job shouldn't have, a figure attached to it.
Right.
And then when you were saying, like, people get out and they think they end up pigeonholing themselves. Infantry can only go into, armed security, or even, just security. But there's so many other skills, and let's say that's the reason why you are getting out. You're tired of the manual labor that infantry and combat arms
That's
tends
it.
to
That's
be.
that's me in a nutshell. I'm
Right,
done
like
with
you're just
manual labor for the rest of my life. Yeah.
right. So so you need time to think about who are you, who are you if you don't have a hammer in your, in your hand? Who are you if you're not, jumping out of planes and kicking in doors and killing the bad guys? So, you know and it's something, again, Carlisle, we were able to kind of like, do exercises with them and, kind of get them to think about, who- you know, why do you like what do you like doing when you're not at work?
I tell people that all the time. Look at the content you're consuming. Look at what you spend your time on doing when you're not at work. Pretty safe bet that those are things that you're very interested in. You could build a life around
Hmm.
and career. I see it all the time, and this is exactly why I think we need to be, we enforce every other damn regulation in the military, but we ignore the transition regulation that says 365 days. If we put them in a unit, there's a lot of things that can be done, like exploring. Like
Yes.
for me, it's taken me a little under a year to find out I'm really good at AI and automation and a systems thinker, and
Awesome.
I'm building a ridiculously cool company on the back of that, and all self-taught, no tech background. I'm just a dumb infantry guy. But
Not
who would
dumb.
have known that I was actually interested in that stuff? Nobody took an opportunity to explore those options with me. It was really like, hey, you've got a GI Bill, you should probably figure that out and go use it. Kind of hindsight's 2020 because I've exhausted that and voc rehab, and it's like, man, if I'd have known that I was interested in the stuff that I'm doing right now that is going to change my life and make me a ridiculous amount of money, I probably would have, done some things with my GI Bill that would have, even kind of expanded my knowledge on what I'm doing now, particularly learning Python or how to actually write and code and stuff like that. Even though AI tools can take care of that for me, and I've taught myself how to do it. I think that there's something to taking advantage of the year long regulation. There's another big piece, and I don't know that TAP really talks about it, but the networking piece and teaching people how to truly. I don't like the word networking because to me that suggests, and I know everybody gets this image in their head. They get this image of like handing a business card out, shaking hands, a few kind of words, and then you got a next thing you know, you got a pile of 20 business cards on your desk that you never look at or never pull out. I look at networking as building relationships
It is.
because somebody, no matter who I meet, I talk to a lot of people, whether the conversation is great, whether I really resonate with that person, whether the energy's high or not, I always learn something from every conversation that I have. And I think that's something that's very unique about getting out is we're pigeonholed into this primary network of just military people, and there's so many other people out there that can help you along your way, and so many people that actually want to help, genuinely want to help for nothing. And that's kind of what I've learned in my journey so far is your network truly is your net worth. And man, building relationships with people, it's a whole lot of fun and it creates a whole lot of opportunity for you.
It is so much fun. So two things, and again, I'm not knocking the CSP or a skill bridge program, because I do think it is valuable. It lets you get into the civilian world. I don't know too much about it as far as like placement, but again, a lot of times it's people that assume that, hey, I've been doing HR for the military for 6 years, 20 years. I'm going to go do HR and get a CSP with doing HR. So I do think that there does need to be some more career exploration before you can even decide on a bridge program.
I love that you
Um,
talk about this because I hear this so much. I talk to, and
because
it's
I know what I'm
primarily
doing.
but it's primarily, and I think you'll agree with this too. The people who pigeonhole themselves into the same career basically walk out of one uniform back into the same office in civilian clothes the next day, doing the same job they've done. It's usually the senior, longer term career people that do that. However, in my travels and talking to people, what I'm discovering is a lot of people don't actually want to do that. And my first question to them is who's saying you have to do that? Well,
Right.
Adam, it's all I know. It's like, well, yeah, the one that stands out is a female Marine reached out to me, and she had made decent money restoring furniture while she was on active duty, buying it on Facebook Marketplace, refurbishing it, and then
Nice.
turning around and selling it. and I think she made like $20,000 or $30,000 just over the course of the last year. She's about to retire. Everybody's telling her, they're all in her ear, telling her, you should just take this job offer that's on the table, doing the same thing that you do. A situation where you're going to walk out of the Marine uniform into the same office in civilian clothes, and she's like, I'm so tired of this. I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, well, who's making you do this?
Right.
I was like, do you think with all of the extra time that you'll have that you can build enough furniture or restore enough furniture to earn a decent living? She's like, well, I mean, I did this while being in the Marine Corps and made X amount of dollars, so I don't see why I couldn't do it. I was like, so then what's stopping you from doing that? And
Right.
she's like, well, everybody says that I shouldn't do that. And I'm like, well, I'm here to tell you should do it. You know what I mean?
A-
And like, that's the kind of stuff that I want people to understand. Like, your hobbies can turn into income for you, particularly if you're going to retire or you're being med boarded and you're going to get some kind of percentage. You have basically an annuity for life.
I always say, don't let your rank dictate your next job title. I had a lieutenant colonel that was retiring, and his last year in uniform, he was taking night classes at the local vocational like adult education to become a mechanic. He was just like, I want to work on cars, and he didn't. And he's like, my family is supportive of it. And I'm like, then who cares what
Exactly.
who cares what other people think? If your family is happy, go for it.
And
Do
I'm willing
not.
to bet he's happy.
Yeah. And
See, and that's the whole point. Like, so I think we get confused. Like, we associate salary with happiness, and that's
yes.
just simply not true. Like, I have friends who, since they've retired, they just work 3 days a week as a greeter at Home Depot or Lowe's,
And they're
and they
probably
talked about
happy.
it there, and they're so happy. They're like, man, I get a discount on all the shit that I want to do at the house. I get to interact. I mean, there's a large veteran community in any Lowe's or Home Depot that you've ever been in.
Oh,
I don't know,
absolutely.
it's huge, but so there's a win there. But just genuinely being happy in what you're doing for income, I think, is like a good starting point. So the exercise I do with people when they reach out for my advice is like, look at the content you're consuming. What are you doing with your free time? Okay, now
Right.
let's critically think about, can you earn an income doing these things? Well, I'd never thought about that. It's like, well, why not? It's 2025. We have the internet and AI. You can turn anything into a source of revenue at this.
Mhm. And you kind of need to know who you are and what you can and cannot do. So when I first started with TAP, the self-assessment or the not self-assessment, the assessment that we used during the MOC crosswalk was the My Next Move .org/vets. And we've since gone over to Milgears. But the My Next Move, one of the things is, education level. And I've got my master's, which means I think I should be in like the five, like, group category 4 or 5. But I also know myself that I don't have a very high stress tolerance. I don't want a high stress job. I would cry every single day. So I'm not going to look for those high stress jobs. I'm going to, like, you got to know. And even when I started, really thinking of making 6 star my, like, my job, um, and creating the company and everything, people are just like, well, why don't you just do that on the side? And I know for myself, I can be like, because when between April and June, from the time I realized I was, going to lose my job to the day that my last day of work, I was working 7 days a week. It wasn't like, 8 hours on the weekends, but like nights and weekends, I was consumed with like, my mission statement and this and that. And I was exhausted. I was like, I don't want to work full time and build a company.
Yeah,
I will say I am lucky that, my husband, has a good job. He's retired, um, so we can be okay for about a year as I build my
as you build your
company,
company, yeah,
and hopefully get to the point where I've surpassed what I was making as a TAP counselor. um, so I get it, like, I'm privileged that I get that, I have that privilege, but I know I can't do it. So if people have to know themselves, and it is okay to say, like, for me, I've admitted I don't do good with under high stress periods, and I can't work 48, hours a week,
Well,
that's just
you're
not
gonna
me.
enjoy this because you just helped me learn something about myself. You said you don't operate well in high stress environments, and that just kind of sparked this epiphany. That was my biggest struggle with everything I tried to do before I went all in on trying to build and become an entrepreneur. Is nothing. I like high stress. I like
Okay.
chaos. I like having to make split second decisions. I've explored this a lot with some of the partnerships that I have. Crystal, thank you so much for pointing this out to me. I can just operate in high stress for a long time before I need
Okay.
to recharge. And then when I do
Yeah.
need to recharge, it's really quick. And so by you saying that and pointing that out, I just realized that was probably my biggest struggle. Is nothing was satiating my need for responsibility, high stress, decision making regularly. And when I decided to build my own thing, it's like now it all falls on me, so I get to deal with all of that. It is high stress. Like I'm the one that has to generate the revenue. Nobody else is going to just give me a paycheck for showing up, kind of thing. So I resonate with what you're saying, and I agree completely. Like you really do have to know yourself. And that's really a big key to being successful in your transition and living a really decent, happy, joyful life on the other side of it.
Mhm. And that, kind of brings up that, we've been focusing more on the professional side, but what about on the personal side? If you know that you're an adrenaline junkie, and, being in the military like that satisfied your adrenaline. All of a sudden you're out of uniform and you don't have that adrenaline that you need, you know, go find something that, brings that adrenaline back up. It doesn't have to be that you're getting paid for it, but make sure you have a hobby, racing cars, jumping off of buildings,
Right.
with
Yeah.
parachutes, but
Yeah. Yeah.
like jumping out of planes. Like find something that's going to satisfy what you're missing. I had a colonel that she didn't know what she wanted to be when she grew up, and I was like, well, let's think about what are you going to miss the most about the military. And she said PT. She's like, I love physical, like she's like, I love doing PT. And I was like, have you thought about, going into, opening up a gym,
Fitness
do something
coaching. Yeah. There's
like
all
fit?
kinds of shit.
And she was like, no, because that's not what my job has been. And I'm like, but it has been,
Right.
and, she actually went and opened up her own gym, and that little bit of like that spark, because you don't have to do what what your MOS has told you and has trained you. There's so many other options out there. And again, we all pigeonhole ourselves.
Yeah.
The
I love telling people like you get to decide what you do. Nobody else, not your
yes.
wife, not your kids, not your parents, not your grandma, not your best friend, not anybody who's been in charge of you for the last however long you've been in. It's you get to make the decision this time, and you can do literally anything that you want, and nobody has any right to tell you otherwise.
hmm And it was funny when you said like grandma, because I always use I always bring like grandma or aunt or uncle. Um, when you are transitioning from the military, and make sure that you do have to learn how to speak like a civilian.
Yeah, I don't
Tell
have that down yet.
tell Have a conversation with, tell your grandmother, tell your aunt, your uncle, someone who has no experience with the military, what you do day to day. And if they look at you like they have like a deer in a headlight, and they nod their head and they're like, that's nice, sweetie, you're not doing a good job explaining what you do. But if you can explain it to, your grandma with like, hey, this is what I do day to day with civilian, and you're using those civilian terms, you're probably going to unlock something, that, or you're going to say it and your grandmother might say, oh, so what you do is blah, blah, blah. And you go, oh, yeah, I guess that is what I do. Have those conversations.
Work
Oh,
work on your elevator pitch.
absolutely. And networking,
Oh
I
man,
yeah,
it's so much
I
fun.
actually, it's so much fun. I actually, because I'm building Six Star, that I am, I joined the Chamber of Commerce, and I am having so much fun going to their socials. The mine here in Carlisle is amazing. They have a breakfast, lunch, and evening social um, once a month, and then those are mixers, so they're like part of the membership, and then once a month it's a paid meet up at for lunch at a local restaurant. And I mean, I'm literally going to anything, and mainly free. I prefer the free ones, but just the people that I'm meeting and networking with. And I am sure that if, a transitioning service member was just go to their Chamber of Commerce and just say, like, hey, I'm getting ready to, I would love to be able to do some networking. I don't think I want to join the chamber, but is there any way that I can, are there any events that I could attend,
Yeah.
for, free, even if it's like, yeah, I know my chamber was like, first two are free. But if you say you're a veteran or transitioning, there's a good chance they're going to be like, oh, sure. Like,
Yeah, I'll caution you on that because my chamber, it's not that way.
okay,
They want money up front, and it's not a small amount. And best I can tell, it's every chamber is going to be different,
right.
right? But the chamber by me, the one that I would join, it doesn't seem to be worth the investment for me.
Okay,
But I'm also pretty good at networking on my own,
right.
so like it's not imperative. I want to pivot now, and I want to talk about Six Star and what you're doing, since
Oh, yeah.
this is always about transition. So you just went through your own massive transition. 7.5 years at a tap class, and overnight your job disappears. You had a little bit of runway, to know when it was coming. I think they had a date attached to that when you found out, so you
Yeah,
could
we had
go into
about 2 months.
yeah, so you could go into crisis mode and start really planning. But talk about that transition for you. And I think it's a little interesting that you say you don't thrive in high stress and you would be crying every day, but starting your own business is pretty high stress, and you seem to be handling it
Uh,
well.
well, that's because when I get stressed, I can go pet my dog.
I
I'm not
know
allowed to bring my dog.
mine's down here laying at my feet, so yeah, I get it.
Um, Yeah, when we got that news, I grieved. I grieved, I kind of gave myself those 48 hours of I couldn't even function, like couldn't even talk to people, like just grieved. And then, from there it was like, okay, make that pivot. Um, Went to a job fair, and honestly, the thought of being the new girl again just made me want to vomit. Um, after being military spouse and like all the different careers, I got used to not being the new girl and being the subject matter expert. So I get that, like that transition of even from the military, like you're the subject matter expert and you're going to be the new person, and
Yeah,
it's nerve
that's a
wracking.
tough pill to swallow for
Um,
sure.
so um, I had been kind of thinking, my husband and I always had this goal of 60 years old, we were going to, retire from the 9 to 5. And I was just like, okay, when I retire from TAP, that was what I was thinking. I want to do like resume writing on the side. So I already had that planned. Then, so people do always, they wonder why Six Star, it's not Six Stars, and this, how the name came about. My husband has always introduced me to people as he would say, have you ever met a Six Star? Me, and they'd be like, no. And he would point to me and be like, well, now you have, because you know, no one will ever outrank my wife. So that's where the Six Star came in, was like being able, so it was like that cute little, like, name that he gave me. So there became the Six Star. We were actually out in Arizona with our friends, and after a bottle or two of wine, we were talking, and my friend's just like, "Well, there you go, Six Star resume." And then I was like, "There," and then I just added the strategy just because it sounded kind of fun. Um,
So why resume writing? Why do you like it so much?
um, it was when I first started at TAP. I was not a fan of the resume writing, but after learning, it was part of the job, so I had to learn. I had a very good mentor, teaching me all of the resume writing, and it became putting, putting a puzzle together, and that's also why my logo is the puzzle piece. It's four puzzle pieces put together, because that is what it is. It is, you're putting together pieces of your life and to create one picture. And just like a jigsaw puzzle, there's numerous different jigsaw puzzles. You just because you do one doesn't mean that it's the same picture for everything. So it's kind of tying in. You're putting together the puzzle for every job. You do need to tailor your resume for different jobs.
Well,
um,
particularly here in 2025 with the
yes.
algorithms and the ATS
Hmm.
and AI. I know your competition is Brad Tachi with Best Military Resume. It's a tool. It's
Oh,
a phenomenal
absolutely.
tool. He's doing great things, and I think there's a place for what he's doing with his tool, and I obviously see that there's a place for what you're doing. The human connection part of it,
Yes,
and
it's that
human in the
human
loop,
connection.
the
Yep.
human in the loop part of it. Are you up to date on all of these ATS things, and like you can help people? Because Brad's tool is not going to be for everybody, just like you're not going to be for everybody, just like I'm
Absolutely.
not for everybody, right? Like
Right.
I don't even believe in this whole competition thing. I think that collaboration is a far better way. If somebody wants to come out and start talking transition and be my competition, that's cool. Like I would actually reach out to that person and collaborate, because it's just going to grow our audience. I also realize, like, I'm not everybody's flavor, and that's
Right.
fine. And the people that I am their flavor are going to stay loyal to me and follow me, and you can see that evidence happening even now, which is, it's incredible. It's a cool place to be in, particularly because I never wanted to be like an authority or an influencer or a thought leader. I just wanted to be the guy I didn't have. So like it's really interesting to be able to be in this position, but I do. I think that there's room for everybody. I think that somebody else could come along and create 7-star resume to compete with you, and it would be just fine. So are you able to do kind of, because I know Brad's thing with Best Military Resume is you take the job description, you put it in there, you take your shell of a resume, and then it does some magic and spins it and kind of basically so you can get past the electronic hurdle of applying for jobs and actually make it to a human. Are you doing the similar?
Yep. I'm doing very similar, and I use AI. I'm not. I'm using. I have to use AI. Like, some of it is that wordsmithing. What I can do, and I have discovered, just with playing with the AI, is that AI is only as good as the information that you feed it. So there,
Context. Yep.
yes. So there are times that I will look at, I will like put in a bullet, and try to create a bullet using AI, and it's giving me shit back. Like it's not hitting what it needs to hit, or it'll like hallucinate something. So it's that human context and being able to, um, you know, extract the story from from the person to really explain it. I just finished working a resume, doing a master resume for a veteran that he right now he's just working part time at, I think it's Lowe's, actually Lowe's and UPS. And I always send out like a questionnaire, because I don't want to ask them, like, I don't want to feel like they're being interviewed. I give them a questionnaire to kind of get their story so that they can write it out, they can take their time. It took him 2 months. Like he reached out to me, and he was ready, but he wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet. And part of his questionnaire, and he goes, it sounds like this makes me sound more important than I am, but really my competition here at UPS is not that is setting the bar low. And I'm like, but see, now you've just undersold yourself. Like if he was to do that, like he would not have thought about putting in that experience, because to him it was just like, well, I have 20 years of experience doing it. You have two. So yeah, I do say that my biggest competition is AI. But again, I bring that human aspect to it. I bring that, being able to really finesse the job titles to get that to match up. Um, and I always say, like, I would love it if someone was to use, best military resume, get that, and
As
then
a framework and then bring
right,
it to
and then
you.
bring it to
Yeah, and
me,
then
and
and then let's bulletproof
let
this thing. Let's make
exactly.
ourselves. Yeah, and I'm all for. I think that's an incredible idea.
I would.
Um, I don't think Brad. I think Brad would support that. I mean, you've seen Brad's
Brad,
results.
call me.
Yeah, did he actually call you?
No, no, no. I'm telling him to call
Yeah,
me.
yeah, dude. I'm telling you, I'll connect you. If you haven't been connected with him,
Yeah, I
I actually just
follow him,
had.
but
Yeah, I just had dinner with him the other
yeah, I
night.
saw that.
It was awesome. But to your point, I think that's incredible. I think it'd be awesome. You and I should get together and we should do my resume just to see what it looks like because I have no idea what I would even put on it now. Because like I don't even think I would include any of my military experience at this point. Like just kind of let that go, and I'm totally turned off to applying for jobs or anything like that. But it'd be interesting to see like how you work and how you take. I mean, because I got a plethora of experience just from building a personal brand, recruiting people to a plant medicine retreat, building an AI company, being a CTO, CAIO, all kinds of different shit. And it's like, man, I don't even know where to begin to put that into a resume if I had to. You know what I mean? So I think it'd
Let
be a
it,
cool
yeah.
experience.
I think it. I think it will be. When I get back from vacation, you will be on my list.
Yeah.
To do. And I also think, and I've always said this, like, okay, like, you don't want to put it together resume. You're not applying for a job. At some point you might need you might need a loan for your company, or you might need investor, or even more, let's get investors, that way we don't have to spend our own money. But an investor is only going, you've got to show that investor what you're able to do. So whether that may not be called a resume, but you're
A
still
CV.
right, like you
I
have
don't.
to.
Where did that even come from? What is a CV?
It is Latin for something, something, because
Yeah, we're just changing shit
right.
to
Yeah,
make ourselves.
it's more of
I
an
agree with what
academic.
you're saying, though. I think having a resume, it's look at it as like kind of a check in with yourself to see, because a big problem for me, just through some childhood trauma and even trauma as an adult that shaped me and my personality. I always don't give myself credit for what I'm actually capable of
No one does.
until I sit down and actually write it out on paper, however messy that looks. And I've done this a couple of times over the last 2 years. Usually at like my year anniversary of starting this entrepreneurial journey, I sit back and I take stock of everything that I've accomplished over the last year, and I'm like, when I actually put it on paper, and then other people read it, they're like, "Holy fuck, dude, you're a machine." Like this is incredible, like what you're able to do, your work ethic and all this. Yet it's never enough for me, right? And so sometimes it's nice to have that on paper to just to look at it and see like I'm actually doing a lot better than I'm giving myself credit for. You know what I mean?
We always undersell ourselves, and a lot of it is because if we're doing what we're quote unquote told to do, then we've accomplished the day. So we don't think of it as like, okay, so, we see it a lot in, like, military, that if you're doing the same thing as your entire platoon, you don't think that you're standing out. Now platoon, 5, 10, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, um that this is where the military spouse comes out in me, because I don't quite know the size of the platoon, but it's what,
So
about
a platoon's
10,
usually between 30 and 40
30,
guys, at
40.
least,
Okay.
and so a squad is nine,
Okay.
and then a company is 100, 150 or so. There you
Right.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're doing the same as 30 people, you're literally one of a dozen, or like a few of a dozen. Um, but if you take that and you put it into the whole population of, the United States or the workforce, you're doing something very unique.
Yeah, you're still the
And
1%, right?
you're
We
that
forget
one,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And you forget it when it's the echo chamber. I know my biggest fear is accidentally being in an echo chamber, like a big fear of mine. Like, but I think society in itself, we tend to put ourselves in echo chambers, and then we forget about how valuable we are. And
I couldn't agree more, particularly now with social media is off the chain. It's nobody. This is my big issue. I think a lot of people have lost the ability to think critically. They just adopt whatever they see online as fact, and they don't do any critical thinking behind it to go form their own opinion, educated opinion. And you're right. It's setting themselves up for failure.
yeah, I mean, and the way the I can never say that word, algorithm is like you if you were scrolling through your phone and you're watching a reel, and then a family member asks you a question, so you stop on that video even though it has nothing to do with anything. All of a sudden, because you stopped on that video for 10 seconds to tell your husband where the gallon of milk is, all of a
Yep.
sudden your whole feed is all on that one
Yep.
topic.
Yep.
It's
I hear
horrible.
you. Marsha, man, what an awesome conversation. I would love to
This is
do this again
awesome.
with you. I want you to tell everybody how they can find Six Star Resume, reach out to you. Let's get you some clients. Let's get some veterans, some serious help. I think that you're leading the charge in fighting some of this. Well, before we do that, I want to ask you, do you have any insight on where the best place to be looking for jobs is? Because I read a kind of an alarming statistic about Glassdoor, Indeed, sites like that, where about 80% of the postings on there are fake,
There,
which
I've read
explains a
that as
lot of
well.
why people are applying to a bunch of shit on Indeed and Glassdoor and never hearing anything back. So, do you have any insights on where people should be looking to apply? Is it better to go straight to the company that you want to work for? Obviously, LinkedIn is a tactic. Reach out to decision makers. Don't be desperate, but just come at them wanting to build a relationship, pick their brain, start building a relationship, and then let them know that you're available for a job, you're interested, kind of thing. Do you have any other insights to that?
Um, I was going to say LinkedIn, everything that you just said, and going back to networking, and or whatever term we want to use. Um, you need to get out there and put yourself out there, and go to job fairs. I think job fairs are huge. Not because you might get that job that one job or two jobs that the company's hiring for, but now you have an actual person. Job fairs also, they're out there hiring for particular jobs. So that those jobs, that they exist. They're not that black hole kind of thing.
There's another thing. I got 3 jobs. Now, mind you, this was several years ago. However, I think the sentiment remains. I got fed up. I just printed my resume off and I went to the places I wanted to work to, handed my resume to the decision maker, and I walked away several times with multiple offers from different places. They all said the same thing. Like, nobody's ever, I've been in business here, one place like 20 years. Nobody's ever walked in with a resume, introduced themselves and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a job." Like, it's so powerful to do that. Like, get out of your own way, stop being anxious and weird about it. And if there's a place you want to work, the worst thing they're going to say is no, and they're going to say no to your face. You're not going to be waiting on an email for weeks that never comes.
Yeah, and get out there and do something. If you're job searching, challenge yourself to do something that scares the shit out of you at least once a week. And you know what? If it is going someplace in person, what's the worst that's going to happen? If just as long as you don't throw up on in their floor, you're good. Like, throw up outside. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Get out of that comfort zone. And again, like the blind emails that you're sending. It, I don't want to say it's a waste of time,
It's a
but at the
waste of
same
time. I'll
time,
say it. It's a waste of
yeah,
time. I
it,
get the emails all the time. People don't apparently read my profile and see what I'm doing, so they're trying to sell me the exact same thing that I'm trying to sell other people. And I'm like, you guys are clueless. Like, cold email is a volume game, and I promise you, you don't have enough money to win that game right now. Unless you want to build a cold email agency and make it a career or a business, it's not going to work for you. There are outliers, however. Some people do get lucky. It's just like entrepreneurs and YouTube gurus. Some people do get lucky, but that's not the status quo. And so I agree with what you're saying. Please tell everybody how they can reach out to you for resume help, any kind of
Absolutely.
transition help, all of that stuff. I want to make sure that our community knows that you exist, knows that even because the government cut your job, that you went out and started your own thing because you care enough. You've seen the problems. You are uniquely qualified to help people get to where they want to go, and you genuinely care. It's not just a revenue generation thing for you. It's truly because you care, because you could have gone and done anything else. You really could have.
Yeah. Thank you for that. The connect with me on LinkedIn daily, or at least 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. I do post on LinkedIn resume hints or job hints and things like that. So connect with me on LinkedIn. My my website for the business is the number six, starresume.com. And my email address, if you want to reach out to me directly, is Marsha Cleff at sixstarresume.com. Um, so it's been fun. I never thought I was going to be an entrepreneur like this, but
Well, I mean,
things happen.
do you have clients? Are you making money now?
Oh yeah, I
That's what I
am.
love to hear. There we
I
go.
I started June 4th was my first official day. My last day at TAP was the 3rd. The 4th I was had my desk set up and everything, and I'm averaging about one new client a week. Some weeks I've had two. Last week was the very first week I only had I didn't get any new clients, which is awesome right now. I know that first year it's about networking and planting the seeds and watering the seeds. One client a week is not going to be sustainable long term, but again, my clients are going to be that word of mouth. I'm for resume rewrite. So for veterans, my resume, if you already have a resume, the resume like rewrite to get it to be result driven. And two tailored resumes. So you're getting three things. Each of my tailored resumes come with a cover letter and also an alignment sheet to show you how your resume matches with the job description. Um, that bundle is $350. If you have nothing but a whole bunch of NCOERs, OERs, just you're basically going to hand me your I Love Me book. That is the same, you get the same bundle. However, that's $450 just because then we're starting from scratch. So, very reasonably, my prices are very reasonably priced for that, for the quality and quantity that you're getting from me. So
Well, and not just that, but the knowledge that you have, having worked with vets for 7.5 years in this pipeline. You've got the social proof to prove that you're worth what you're charging. Marsha, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Thank you for coming on and
absolutely,
having this conversation with me. I can't wait to see when this releases how many people actually find you,
I
and
can't wait.
I can't wait also to see Six Star Resume. Obviously, I'm going to be pushing it along with BMR and Brad,
Thank
and
you.
I'll connect you with Brad as well. I think there could be some kind of unique partnership there.
That'd be awesome.
And I think you're going to do incredible things. And just thank you for being a resource for the community. I'm grateful for it. I wish I would have known that you existed when I got out a decade ago.
That's what my
The
husband
same,
said too. Well, he
yeah,
knew I existed.
yeah, yeah,
He wished that he knew that he could have paid someone to work his resume with him.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
We've been married 22 years. He knows I existed 10 years ago.
But, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Marsha Cleff. Please reach out to her if you're struggling to find a job. You need a resume rewrite. She's not going to steer you in the wrong direction. And in fact, I'm willing to bet you'll have a lot more success than trying to do it on your own. Invest a little bit of money into yourself. Nothing's going to happen for you unless you start investing in yourself, whether that's time, money, networking, whatever that looks like. You have to invest in yourself. Nobody's coming to save you. Marsha, thank you so much for being here.
You are very welcome. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at the Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.